Hello, and welcome to the Knox County Public Library's Tutor Team. My name is Mr. Frederick, and today I will be tutoring grades 4 and 5 in English Language Arts. Our topic today is going to be about plot. The Indiana standards that we will be covering today are, for 4th grade, describe a character, setting, or event in a story or play, drawing on specific details in the text and how that impacts the plot. And for 5th grade, describe 2 or more characters, settings, or events in a story or play, drawing on specific details in the text and how they impact the plot. So, what is a plot? Well, the plot is used to tell a story. All stories must have a plot. No plot equals no story. So, continuing on with that, for there to be a story to tell, something has to change. Just think, if everything stayed the same, there would be no story. So, an event can change in a story. For example, 2 friends go on a hike. At the start of the story, 2 friends are standing at the beginning of a hiking trail looking at a map. What's the change? Well, they started to hike on the trail. Another example of change in a story is that a decision is made. For example, the hikers decide to take a break to roast marshmallows. At the start of the story, the hikers are on a hiking trail, or they're hiking along the trail, and then the change is they decide to stop. A relationship between 2 characters may change in the story. So, for example, the hikers disagree over the best way to roast marshmallows and stop speaking to one another. At the start, the hikers were preparing to roast marshmallows. The change was that hikers disagreed and they stopped speaking. A character trait may change. A character trait is how you would describe a character. For example, are they a jealous person? Or maybe they're rude, maybe they're nice, maybe they're caring. All of those are character traits. For example, one hiker becomes rude and makes fun of the way the other hikers roast his marshmallows. Hikers are roasting marshmallows at the start of this, but the change was that one hiker started exhibiting rude behavior. Another kind of change may be an understanding. For example, the hiker realized that he was being rude and he apologized to the other. At the start, the hiker was being rude. The change was that he understood he was kind of being a jerk, and he apologized to the other hiker. Now, think of a trail in the woods. Plot is the map from point A to point B, so where it begins in the story and then how it eventually ends. Let's use an example to start. Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Jack fell down and broke his crown, and Jill came tumbling after. Let's think of that trail in the woods. At point A, Jack and Jill are at the bottom of the hill. Jack and Jill go up the hill. That's an example of the first change. Jack falls. That's another example of a change. Jill comes tumbling after. There's another change. And to end, Jack and Jill are back at the bottom of the hill, but probably a little bruised up. So, we're going to talk about mapping the plot in the story. In this example, the story started and ended in the same place. That doesn't always happen, though. Many stories start and end in different places. In fact, I would say most of the time that's the case. So, elements of a plot. All plots have standard elements. These standard elements always happen in the same sequence. And remember, sequence is an order of events. Otherwise, the plot wouldn't make sense. For example, you're not going to get up and get dressed and then take a shower. That wouldn't make sense at all. So, just like everything else, there's got to be specific orders of things, or the story's just not going to make sense. Now, the first type of element of a plot we're going to talk about is an exposition. The exposition is the beginning of the story. It's going to set up the characters and introduce them, and it's going to talk about the setting. And remember, a setting is a time or a place in the story. The next element of a plot is going to be the rising action. The conflict of the story is revealed, and conflict means the problem. The story becomes more complicated. Notice that in the plot part, we went from the exposition, and now the rising action is kind of that mountain is starting to go up. After rising action, we have the climax. That's the turning point of the story. It's the highest point of interest. It's also going to be where the character meets that problem. After the climax, we have falling action. The story's starting to wrap up then. The problem is starting to get fixed, and the events in the story are starting to end. So we're going back down. So we're just remember, rising action goes up. After the climax, we go to the falling action. And then lastly, we have the resolution. This is the end of the story. This is the outcome of the conflict is revealed. So everything's kind of wrapping up and ending in the resolution of the story. Now, we're going to practice. So let's begin by reading a little more detailed version of the story. It's washing day at the Johnson house. Jack and Jill's mom asked them to fetch a pail of water. The well is at the top of the hill. They know the pail will be heavy once it is full of water, so they climb the hill together. They arrive at the top of the steep hill out of breath. Jack fetches the water from the bottom of the well. They carefully lift the bucket out of the well and then start down the hill together, each with one hand on the pail. Suddenly, Jack trips. He begins rolling down the hill. Jill, caught off balance, falls and comes tumbling after Jack. They arrive at the bottom of the hill, dazed, confused, bruised, and with no water. They hobble home to tell their mother what just happened. And when they arrive home, Mrs. Johnson mends Jack and Jill's cuts and bruises, and then goes up the hill to fetch the pail of water herself. So the exposition. Now remember, the exposition is when they introduce the characters and the setting. It's washing day, so we know that's when something's happening. Jack and Jill's mom asks Jack and Jill to fetch a pail of water. The well is at the top of a steep hill. So we get the setting there, and we get the characters with Jack and Jill and their mother. The next part of the story is the rising action. Remember, that's where the events are starting to build up. Jack and Jill go up the hill together. Jack and Jill arrive at the top of the hill. Jack fetches the water from the well. Jack and Jill start down the hill together with a bucket between them. After the rising action, we have the climax. And in this case, it's where Jack falls. That's where the problem is. The falling action, remember, this is kind of where we're finding a solution to our problem, and things are kind of winding down. Jill comes tumbling down the hill after Jack. Jack and Jill arrive at the bottom of the hill, bruised but with no water, and Jack and Jill hobble home. Now, for the resolution, which is kind of the ending or conclusion, Jack and Jill's mom mends their cuts and bruises. Jack and Jill's mom goes up the hill and gets the water herself, basically ending the story. Now, we're going to practice on another one. We're going to talk about Little Miss Muffet. Little Miss Muffet sat on a tuffet, eating her curds and whey. Along came a spider who sat down beside her and frightened Miss Muffet away. Miss Muffet was hungry. She had been up for hours cleaning the house for the visitors that would be coming to her apartment that evening. It was almost noon when she realized that she hadn't taken the time to eat breakfast yet. Miss Muffet prepared her favorite breakfast, curds and whey. She looked out the window and saw that it looked beautiful outside. She decided to enjoy her breakfast on the tuffet on her balcony. Miss Muffet sat down and began eating her curds and whey. Suddenly she saw a spider crawl across the balcony floor and stop right next to her tuffet. She screamed, she jumped up, and ran into her apartment. Miss Muffet finished her breakfast at the kitchen table. Now remember, the exposition is beginning where the characters are introduced in the setting. Miss Muffet has been cleaning her apartment for visitors all morning. It's almost noon and Miss Muffet hasn't eaten breakfast yet. That's the exposition. The rising action is Miss Muffet decides to make herself breakfast. Miss Muffet looks out the window and, because it looks beautiful outside, decides to eat her breakfast on the balcony. Miss Muffet sits down on her tuffet to enjoy her breakfast. Now that's the rising action. That's leading up to the climax. What do you think the climax is going to be this time? Remember, that's kind of the big problem in the story. What was her problem? Well, if you said Then along comes a spider. Remember, she didn't like spiders at all. That would be your climax. That's where the big problem happens. Because Miss Muffet just met the spider. Remember, the climax is when the character meets the problem of the story, or the conflict. So what happened after she came up with it to the spider? Miss Muffet screams, jumps up, and runs inside. It's kind of ending her problem because she's running away from what scared her. And the resolution, Miss Muffet finished her breakfast inside at the kitchen table. Now, we're going to talk about another one, a story about Fido. Fido hated being home by himself all day. He lived for the weekends, when the rest of the family was home and there was activity in the house. As it was, he spent most weekdays snoozing on the couch. When he got bored, he would go find a bone and chomp on it for a while. Eventually, he would get tired of his bone, so he would stare out the window at the empty street. One spring day, he was staring lazily out the window, and he saw an unfamiliar man walk by. He was walking slowly up the street. The man looked around and behind himself every few seconds. Fido knew that something was not right, so he continued to watch the man silently. Suddenly, the man walked to the front porch of the house across the street and started to break inside. Fido jumped up, barked, snarled, and ran in circles, hoping to do anything he could to cause a commotion and scare the man away. The man did hear Fido's antics and ran away from the house. Fido was a hero, even if no one knew it but him. So, let's look at the exposition. Remember, the exposition is when the characters are introduced. We learned about Fido. We learned that he loved the weekends because that was the time that all of his family were home. And they're just kind of bored, right? If I go back and look for the rising action, those events, we notice that he was kind of looking for a bone to chomp on it for a while to keep himself occupied because he was bored. And then he kind of got tired of that bone, so he would start staring out the window and think about, what was the problem? That's our climax. What happened that in the story that started to kind of worry Fido? He saw a strange man walking down the street, and he was kind of breaking in the house across the street. That would be a problem. That would be a problem for anybody, right? How did he fix it, though? That's what the following action is. Think about the story, and what did he do? If he said that he started barking and making a commotion trying to scare the man, you would be right. That would be our following action. And then the resolution is, how does it all end? Well, we know it all ended because he scared the man away. That would be what you should be having for the resolution. And we're going to double check to make sure that what we said was correct. He's home alone all day during the week. He typically gets very bored at home. We said he was home one day. He was looking out a window when he sees a man walk into the neighbor's house. That the man tried to break into the house. The following action was that Fido makes a lot of commotion to scare the man away, and the resolution that Fido saved the day, but no one will ever know of his heroic actions. So that's kind of our short lesson about plot and characters and climax and falling and rising action. If you would like to watch this video again, or you would like to watch any of our other Tutor Team videos, you can go to our YouTube and search Knox County Public Library's Tutor Team. Thanks again for watching our video today. I will look forward to next week. Thank you.